At this time, I have Caroline.
Yeah, thank you, Molly.
Impact update.
Yeah, so I am really excited to bring this back to the board. Like John said, many of you have asked over the years, what is the impact of the ACH work? And this report has been a long time coming. It was actually ready in November, and we as staff slightly delayed its release. We wanted to make some fine-tuning things, and then of course we had the big transition at the end of the year. So we're delayed in getting it to you, but here it is. And I'm really excited to have Deborah Hansen. Deborah, if you can wave so people, yep, she's going to join us and walk us through some of what we found today about the work that we did through the MTP, specifically with our Whole Person Care Collaborative and also with our Transitional Care and Diversion Intervention Work Group. To set the stage a little bit about, well, first off, if you didn't get a chance to read the report, it's in your packet, pages 9 through 21, but fear not, it's pretty much double spaced. So it's a quick and a fun read. And I hope that if you didn't get a chance to read it, you will after today's meeting. A couple things I wanted to share about ripple effects mapping. Well, first off, I'm curious if anybody, raise your hand if you've heard of this evaluation method before. Okay, that's great. Deborah, you've got a blank slate. You get to wow them today. This is an evaluation process that really caught my eye. It resonated for me because it's especially appropriate for programs or interventions that are complex and involve a wide range of participants and stakeholders, right? Does that sound familiar to any of you? That has basically been the work with our partners over the last 5 years. The other thing I really liked about it is that it's not necessarily about taking credit for good outcomes, it's about understanding the various contributions that all of our partners have brought to the table. And I don't know, I mean, you all probably remember that under the Medicaid transformation, the accountability framework that the state chose was tied to these pay for performance incentives, P for Ps. Kat, I know you're very deeply familiar with them because the NCOs have the pleasure of having P for Ps as well. And there was like a 107-page guide, measurement guide. And basically these P for Ps were metrics that were based on claims, and they really largely focused on healthcare utilization and effectiveness. And all ACHs were held accountable for demonstrating improvements on these metrics. But I think many of you have, well, I have felt this way. Let me speak for myself. I've always felt that those metrics have never really painted the full picture. And from an evaluation standpoint, we've often wondered a few things, like how can we capture the impact of our work as an ACH, since we operate kind of 1 or 2 levels up from the healthcare providers? We're at a systems level. So another way to put that is there a more appropriate way to measure our ACH performance than claims-based metrics? And then also, when you think about health improvement and transformation, it's really complex work. It's dynamic, interdependent. There's lots of partners, lots of moving parts, and relationships really matter. And so how can we capture the impact of our work when the initiatives we're managing are so full of complexity? And it's not as clean cut and deterministic as the P for Ps. So we've investigated and explored a few other evaluation methods to put in our toolbox. I don't know if you all remember, we worked with the Center for Community Health and Evaluation a few years back. They conducted some evaluations for us, mostly based on surveys and stakeholder evaluations. And then our work with Visible Network Labs this year is also a great tool in our evaluation toolbox. So I hope you join the March 22nd partner convening to understand why. So last year, we did 2 ripple effects mapping sessions, and to better understand the progress of our work, and I want to introduce you to someone that I feel super lucky to be able to work with, and that's Deborah. She's an associate professor and county extension director with Washington State University. She focuses on community and economic development in rural Stevens County. So she gets what it's like to work and operate in a rural region. And she's actually one of the original architects of ripple effect mapping. And I think it came out over a decade ago, Deborah, right? And I think you coined the term, in fact.
Yep.
So Deborah, it's not the first time we've crossed paths with her. I don't know if you all remember years back, Crystal Eshelman helped bring together an opioid response conference, which was based on a distributed conference model. And Deborah really helped Crystal and our ACH figure out that model. And it was really cool because we had different sites across our large region that could listen collectively to one speaker, but then come together locally to figure out what did what we just heard mean for our local community. And Deborah's also on the board of Rural Resources. I wanted to mention that and connect some dots because Rural Resources is a community action council that we are currently funding some exciting work on in the Grand Coulee area. And Deborah, I think you also work on broadband access. And in fact, today we're talking about telehealth and broadband. So she is a kindred spirit and we're lucky to have her. Deborah, I don't think Jean is.
It doesn't look like she was able to make it. Yeah, she's been having some health problems, so it may not have.
No problem. So we had assistance from Jean. You'll see her name at the end of the report. She did a heavy lift on the report writing, and we hope you learn a lot from that report in the packet. But for now, let's turn it over to Deborah, and you can kind of tell us a little bit more about REM, the method, and then also what we discovered from our sessions.
You bet. I wanted to also connect a couple other dots. Senator Perlett, you won't remember me, but my very first job was the Learning Center coordinator here in Stevens County, and you were active in the Wenatchee Learning Center, I know, years ago, 20 years ago, long time ago. So great to see you. And I see Crystal Eshelman is on. We really had some fun working on that project. I understand what you're trying to tell with your evaluation and your stories, because it's the kind of work I do in Stevens County. It's messy and long, and players come in and out, and we never really know exactly. We don't count carrots anymore in our work. We need to know what kind of impact did we have, and does it matter? And I created ripple effects mapping after doing a community leadership program that was 18 months, grant funded. And I heard a story from a friend about an outcome that I thought we will never capture that in a survey or even a stakeholder group. So created ripple effects mapping to kind of gather this messy, interesting, impactful work that everybody's doing. And the thing that I love the most, and I'll start the process with and end the process with today, is people are talking about their stories, what impacted them, their organizations, their communities, and how they connected it to the work that they've done with you. So we don't come with any preconceived ideas about how it works. So I'm going to share my screen if everybody give me a possibility to do that.
I think you should have that already.
Okay, and let's see if you guys can see my screen then.
And while Deborah pulls up her screen, I'll just give you a little more context. These two sessions that we did last year, I think we had 8 folks from the Whole Person Care Collaborative. Does that sound right, Wendy? If not, unmute and correct me. And then John, I think we had maybe 5 or 6 of your partners from the Transitional Care and Divergent Intervention Work Group. And essentially we asked them, like, what was the impact of your participation in these ACH initiatives? And Deborah, we still don't see your share.
You still don't see my screen. Yep, see, I gotta do this again now. Hang on. And show. I'm pulling up the wrong. Let's see if you see that one.
Yep.
Okay. There we go. I had it up twice. So I want to make sure you can see it. Now you can see 3 women standing in front of a map.
Yeah, it's still in presenter mode though. Deborah, are you okay with that? Where we see the
yeah.
If you go to display settings at the top, if you click switch swap presenter view and slideshow, I think there you go. Now we don't see your notes.
I don't see my secret sauce coming down the pipe. Well, I want to say first off, it was really enjoyable to work with John and Wendy and Caroline because they care about the work that you're doing with the NCACH. And I love working with groups that care. I also work with Better Health Together here in our community and have just been appointed one of the coalition not directors, but facilitators. So I'm thoroughly engaged in the work that you're doing, but it was fun to work on this project. So I always like to put this slide up first when I talk about ripple effects mapping, because this was an actual event done down in the gorge area where these three women spontaneously were celebrating this evaluation tool. And to me, having been in extension for 20 plus years now, I've been involved in a lot of evaluation that is not all that fun. It's necessary. I know why we need to do it, but it isn't engaging and fun. And ripple effects mapping is that because people are telling their own stories, which is why I think it's valuable for your work. Okay, now see if you got the second slide.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so the few slides you're going to see at the beginning are when we were doing it face to face, and this is a very active process with butcher paper on the wall and colored markers. The process is the same whether we do it on Zoom or not, and there's benefits to both. But the primary purpose is to find out the unintended and intended results of the work that you do. So we're asking them to tell stories about work that they're proud of and things that they found value. And it can be something that you intentionally tried to teach them or have them do, or it can be something that is absolutely unintended. Because it's their story, it can come out in a lot of different ways. But the method works with individuals, with groups, with communities, and with organizations, because again, it's the people in the room that are telling the story and leading it towards the information that you need for your group. So let's first talk about the benefits to the evaluators, because that's what you were looking at when you hired WSU to do this work for you. The benefits are it collects stories and impacts. It captures chain events from complex or evolving work. The work that you do doesn't have a start and stop date. It's continually evolving and always doing more in your communities. You can do it mid-program or post-program. So this is something you can do it at the end of a grant, or you can do it continually through a program. It's also a group validation of results. And people ask me about this method, if people will tell just good stories or embellish stories. And I say, when you're in a group and you tell a story, others will correct you if you're wrong. If you're filling out a survey on your own in the darkness of your office, you can tell anything you want and no one's going to be able to tell if you're spinning it a little bit. So I think it's great to have people all come together and talk about the collective benefits of their work. It's also beneficial when the outcomes are difficult to conceptualize and measure with other methods. And Caroline talked about that a little bit, and even John mentioned it. This is work that we're doing for communities and groups where people are coming in and out, and it is very difficult to measure all things. There are some things you can measure, and you'll see that in some of the ripples. But there's also benefits to the participants. They can see emerging patterns and trends when we start putting things on the wall and when we start putting things on Zoom. They can hear stories that are coming from their peers and their colleagues and think, yes, that happened to me too, or no, my story is a little bit different. They do reflection and growth. They think about their work and their connection to the organization and each other. I like it also because it makes it positive and hopeful when you see the results. Most of these groups are doing their small part of this work with one or two partners, but not collectively. So when you can see it all come together in a big visual way, you start saying, okay, I'm not working on that, but I can see that Joe is working on that. And that's great that he's had some positive outcomes. So it connects me to that larger purpose of the agency, of the community, of the healthy outcomes that you want. And the process itself is fun and engaging, and it's visual. The live one is especially that way, but I think it's even fun on the Zoom version, the online version, because you're hearing great stories and celebrating work that people are doing. So that's the ripple effects mapping in a nutshell, but I want to show you two different maps, one out of each of the groups. and show how the story unfolds as we have this conversation. Since you haven't experienced it, what happens is we ask general questions of the participants, and then we break them out into small groups so that they can talk about it a little bit, but then we pull them all together and map it on an online map. I'm going to show you how the maps unfold, and then I'll show you a bigger map at the end. I do it this way because I like you to see the ripples and how they come about before you see the big map that's hard to see. That's also in your report. Okay, so one of the themes that came out, and Jean Henscheid is the one that helps us take all this data and as qualitative data, analyze it, theme it, and come up with the report that she wrote. It is truly qualitative data. It is not just stories, it's stories that mean something. And one of the themes that she came out with was more gratifying work. So one of the comments was, I was proud because NCACH is a facilitating conduit, and it opens doors to many agencies. It improves communications. Now imagine this is a participant telling the story. It improved communications. This person was from the EMS and says it empowered us to have ownership in the process, and it had a downstream effect. Doors are open for me to pick up the phone and call a nurse or a PCP. And when we did that before, we weren't sure if anyone cared or if we were making the right connections. But now we're using EMS power, influence, and knowledge to what we witness in the home to work for a solution with the PCP, clinic, adult aging, law enforcement, and others. So you can see how as they start to tell the story and I ask questions, they're building this story of yes, the doors are open. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that we have power and influence and knowledge. And that's that more gratifying work from start to finish of their work as an EMS. Another story or theme that came out was new skills and building relationships. So this story started with behavioral health and metabolic monitoring, blood pressure and diabetic and things like that. And that's something you absolutely can measure, right? You can do a report. We were held accountable and had to report these metrics. And our organizational goal was to measure up to get the pressure down. Our goal was 80%. And it was really great at the end of the project to see those scores and beat that 80% goal. So you can imagine this person telling the story, how proud they were that we set this high goal and that we were able to reach it. And that we monitored every patient that walked in the door. This is significant because patients are coming into our behavioral health biweekly. But it's a win for our nurses because they feel like they're doing nursing work again and part of the system. And we have countless examples of catching numbers that needed to be reported and referred back to primary care. And it got people treated sooner than if they had waited. So you can see them thinking through this. Yes, we measured. Yes, we met my goal. But this is why it's important. It gets people into treatment sooner than they would have. So ripple effects mapping has 4 different components. So I talked about the positive questions that we ask people. We are not looking for the negative things that didn't work. We want to know what does work. It's very participatory. The groups themselves create this map and create the story in the hour and a half that we spend with them. They do a lot of interviewing and reflection while they're there. They think about the stories that they're telling and what their colleagues and partners are telling. And then the radiant thinking is what creates those ripples. It creates this, it helps us think beyond just a story, but how does that story change and how does it change the work that we do? It's also very participatory in Zoom. You can see Heather up here from the WPCC. When she's telling her story, she's feeling very buoyant about it. And we have somebody typing that story on the map. So not only is she telling a story, she's seeing it come to life on the map. And even though we change the data, not change the data, but we verify the data from the transcript and we make sure that it's accurate, I think there's some kind of transitionary change of you telling a story and seeing that somebody's putting on a map in front of you, that it's that instant validation that my story matters. And that is what I had as far as ripple effects mapping. And I know you have the report in front of you, and there's also some breakout stories in there as well. And I would love to answer any questions that you have. It's a very active thing, so it's kind of hard to explain how it magically happens, but the people in the room really enjoy the process. And I think Deb Miller was there. I think she was at one of the events. So she
was at the WPCC ripple effects mapping session.
So I'm here to answer any questions or add anything that you would like to, Caroline, Wendy, or John.
I'm just going to add a link in the chat for those who, if anybody wants to learn more about the history or the methods of REM, you're welcome to go look at that after the meeting. Let's prioritize questions and see if there are any from board members. For those of you who've wondered, like, what impact have we had as an ACH? Do you have questions about the report or even this method, or open for your questions or reflections?
This is Molly. It looks like Penny may have had something in the chat that she was talking about.
Oh, let me check that down. Okay.
If she wants to elaborate. Maybe.
Yep, and Deb Miller was there doing stories, right? So she could have been the one telling one of those stories. Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was off mute. No, that's just what I noticed. And that was really empowering to hear at our last NCACH work meeting, or our first in-person one, to listen to her map the stories out like that for an individual made it very not only empowering, but accountable. It lets you know that action was actually happening, and it gave you a really clear direction of what the next step should be and whether or not the steps you had taken had been resourceful and useful, so that you didn't possibly repeat something that wouldn't work with the particular person. And it also lets you know, because a lot of people, you walk out into I don't have to tell this group, but you walk out into the community and they're like, just give the homeless person a home. And they don't realize the 20 steps to getting a home. And this maps that out, and it explains it to those that we're engaging with more clearly of what the 20 steps to a home looks like. I love it. When Deb shared it with us, primo, chef's kiss, love it.
Oh my God. So Penny, I love one thing I like about ripple effects mapping. It's completely open source and we can always change it along the way. And I never thought of it as a tool for helping people understand A, their actions, or B, their next steps on how to get through that. Just such a visual way. I'm going to explore that. That's really great.
I raised 6 teenagers.
Oh,
They want the car right away. To get to the car keys, there's a lot of steps.
yep. Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question for the NCACH team from the report. Were there things that surprised you all about some of the impact that came forward, or things that you sort of would want to highlight for the board?
Good question. I think the collaborations and relationships and whole person focus, I think we knew that would probably come out of it, because the whole person care collaborative, and then also just bringing all of our different partners together in regular work group meetings. But I think the gratifying work is maybe something that I didn't really think about up front. Like, it's not something that you see in the MTP construct, for example. I've heard some folks mention it for sure as the fourth, what is that called? What's the term I'm looking for? Jesus, I know I've heard you mention it. Like, it's the fourth under the Medicaid transformation. They talk about 3 things: reduced healthcare costs. The fear of losing funding. I don't know if any of you want to read that section, but that is an interesting one. Just how much is this work and momentum really, as is the funding, the sustained funding critical, or will they be able to continue some of the great work that they've done? And I think you'll see in Wendy's presentation later that some of what they started is going to continue, and there's still motivation with or without continued funding. So that's a hopeful message, but just from a sustainability lens, I think that's an interesting section to go look at. Wendy, John?
Kat, for me, well, one thing I would call out just for all board members is Ray Eckmeyer was not part of this group. So when you see EMS stuff and he's normally the loudest, most promoting voice, you just assume that that was Ray, and it wasn't. But you know, few things like when we're finding participants for the work, honestly, like when I was looking on a reporting process template, like a written template, and the people who were there, like the people who were there weren't the best report writers. Like they weren't the ones that I would call my A participants. But I was surprised by how much they shared in the verbal format of it, and how excited they were that I learned a lot more from that portion than I did in the reports that they wrote. And then I think for EMS, you know, we had 2 EMS participants there. The thing that's hard to capture, right, like is community paramedicine it's a long haul process that it's not, there's a lot of legislative and conversations that need to go on before you actually get a good set community paramedicine program across the state. And from the reports I see, you can see that our EMS providers have moved from one stage to the next because they're more engaged, they have more ownership, they're making better connections, and they might not have robust community paramedicine programs, but you can see that they've moved closer to that direction because of the work that we've been doing with them over the years. Wendy?
With the WPCC, we had so many touch points with our partners every single month that I don't know that we were really surprised at what we heard. It validated what we thought, and probably the anecdotal stories that we would hear them repeated by other individuals. So there was a lot of validation, and I'll go into some of the impact of the WPCC on the next presentation. So I don't want to get too much into that.
Any other questions from board members as you think about impact in the past or impact in the future?
Deborah, thank you for the presentation. It's something that I've been really interested in learning more about, this approach to evaluation. I wonder if there is in the setup anything done to ensure that you end up with a product that is as honest as possible. You mentioned earlier that people will call each other if somebody says embellishing their impact. I find that most people tend to avoid conflict or creating uncomfortable feelings in group settings, and so I wonder if there's something in the setup or some mechanism in place in the process to facilitate that kind of feedback that would help end up with a more honest outcome of the process.
Sure, and it's a question that we often receive because we want to make sure that we're portraying the right information. When we do the data collection, we assume that they're telling the truth, and we put it all together. We do then test the audio to the transcript and make sure that the map is correct. And then we do a member check with the people that, like Caroline and John and Wendy, to make sure that what they know to be true is there. Past that, we do take it back to the individuals, but there's actually no way to tell if they are or are not embellishing a story. During the event, there's many times people will start a story and they'll say, okay, wait a minute, that's a great story, but is that really because of this work with NCACH, or is that something else? It sounds like something maybe you did at the school district. And they'll go, oh yeah, that was sort of related, but you try to have this conversation about how it directly relates to the agency. And it is a tool to use for gathering data. It is not the only tool to use when you're trying to figure out the impacts of your work. This is a way to collect qualitative stories and story gathering. I wouldn't use it if you're really trying to prove or disprove something. I wouldn't use it as the only tool. I myself have used it in groups and then come away with, boy, I really better do some more research on XYZ because they reported that out and that didn't sound quite right. So I better do some checking on that. Or they bring up opportunities that I never thought of. And then I think, oh, I should find out if everybody's run for an office because they keep talking about running for elected office. So it's a way to help you kind of gather some information and stories. It doesn't absolutely, I mean, the questions are very open-ended because we want them to come up with the unintended type of stories, we're not asking very specific questions of things. Does that answer your question, Jesus?
Yeah, thank you for that insight.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it makes real hardcore evaluators a bit squirmy. And I'm fine with that. I am not an evaluator. I'm a community development, trying to figure out how to tell a story. I'm an old marketing graphic designer. That part is valuable to me. There are lots of other ways that you have to look at it from the other angles. So
yeah, it's a tool.
It's
in the
a tool, right.
toolbox. Yeah. But what I like about it is I feel like you get a lot richer content than when you're looking at, for example, like the group metrics. And in this case, I feel like it's closer to what we as an ACH are trying to do as we convene partners and try to increase collaboration and relationships. Yeah.
Well, I'll just make one other comment. I've done this for 12 years now. I've probably done 50 or 60 ripple maps with communities and tribes and groups. And every time somebody tells a story that either the hair on the back of my neck goes up or I cry because it's so personal and it means so much to them. And it's not the big things all the time. Some of it's that little, I shifted my perspective because of XYZ. And to me, see, look, I'm getting my right back here. That to me is where we are going to make change, is when we get people to say that made a difference in my life. So, okay, enough, I'm done.
And one thing I just wanted to mention really quickly is that we're actually thinking of doing at least one additional ripple effects mapping session with recovery coaches potentially in the fall, and specifically as it relates to the Narcan vending machines and their impact. And that's, again, just one tool in the toolbox, and it's going to complement some more quantitative data that's being collected by Beacon. But I think it's a really good point to also realize what this tool is for, and then to not lose sight on other tools or other methods that we might need to employ to ask the questions of like, what's not working well and what could work better. So I think that's a good point. It's just one of the things that you might want to do along with other evaluation methods. So I think that the only last thing I'll mention is I apologize for how tiny those maps are on pages 20 and 21. That's how rich those sessions were. And I put a little tip in there. If you're viewing that document in PDF, I really encourage you to get very familiar with your control scroll mouse and also space bar mouse, because that will allow you to zoom in and then move around the document. Otherwise, you'll never be able to get at all those ripples. But it might be something fun to explore because the people's voices really come through.
So Caroline, is it okay if I stay and listen if we're going to be doing more?
Absolutely, yeah. Anybody, yeah,
listen?
Of course.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of stuff that will pique your interest, and that's related to your worlds too, coming up, Deborah. Well, thanks everybody, and reach out if you have any questions about this particular report and method. We can always come back with more information if you want. So,
before you leave,
oh yes.
Before you leave the subject, I want to first of all thank you for sending out the link to about ripple effects mapping. I'm not entirely familiar with it either. I've heard of it, but I've never actually had a chance to really delve into it a little bit. And in storytelling, in terms of looking whether something's being effective in the community, I think it's helpful. But I also would emphasize that it's one tool, it's not the tool.
Right.
And relying, I guess, somewhat more on my accounting background in terms of qualitative and quantitative. I like to have a combination of both. I don't think that one or the other is fully tells the whole story. And so I guess I'm a little squirrely with it right now, but I'd like to read more, and I'll learn a little bit more. And thank you again for sending it out. Thank you, Deborah, for your time as well.
You bet. Ken, to be honest, I'm squirrely with it sometimes. I mean, I like I said, I'm an all graphic designer, and every time an evaluator says this is a good thing, I go, oh, phew.
Yeah, I totally understand
really
that.
Get it.
Yes, it's actually something that has been discussed from my old community action days as well. So I understand we've had some discussions in the past about ripple effects, because it's always challenging to be able to tell our stories on a number of things, and very good. So, and I'm sure Linda would probably understand as well, because many of us who visit the legislature very often, sometimes stories are the best thing that we have. And I think that can be very effective too. So thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for letting me play.
Yeah, stay on, Deborah, for the rest of the meeting. But I just want to say one more thing, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about evaluation, not just at the ACH, but in my prior work. And one thing I will say is that I think when you do really complex work, you have to start to explore structures and processes that match that complexity. And when you don't, you end up using methods that might be more linear and predictive with logic models and, you know, control groups and so on, but they're actually mismatched to how complex the work is. So the results that you get from those methods give you an answer that is actually not telling you the full picture, and it sometimes tells you that something is not working when really the evaluation question you posed was not the correct one. So that has been for me a very interesting journey of like thinking about systems level work and what that means in terms of that evaluation methods. And I love talking about it. And so Ken, if you, after you read the report, if you want to talk more and have a back and forth, I think it'd be great, because it's really hard. This work is hard to measure, and the P for Ps are not the answer. That's just my opinion. And I think we'll have even harder things to measure going forward. So food for thought for everyone.